All right, we are live, and today we are going to be talking about some really interesting books, and we're going to be doing question and answer. We are also um, doing something new in that we are streaming to Instagram, and that's a new thing for us. So it's going to be, I think, a really fun time together because now we've got a whole community on Instagram as well that is it's we've got almost 20,000 people on Instagram, and so it's really important to me for us to be serving all of these people. And today I'm going to be giving you a bunch of book recommendations. But if you also have questions, go ahead and put the questions in the comment. We'll be tabbing in a little bit back and forth between Instagram and YouTube and TikTok to give you what hopefully is some really good recommendations for books. And when we tab back and forth between them, we'll be answering the questions that you have. Let's give you my first book. First book is this book called The Sabbath. And if you go to the links in my profile, there is an Amazon link in there where it's got a place where you can buy all of these. There's also bookshop.org, which is a great place. But this is a book called Sabbath, and it's by a guy named Abraham Joshua Heschel, and he was a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary. But this book is really, I don't know, it's brilliant. And I think this book is important because it sort of stands as a prophetic voice against the modern capitalist American culture, not against the political system, but against one of the biggest cultural values that American and capitalism has, in that people are often defined not by who they are, not by what's going on inside of them. People are defined like a tool, right? We are objectified, and it is our professional accomplishments that define us. And the idea of the Sabbath actually stands in opposition to that. It stands in opposition to that because it pushes back on the whole idea that you need to spend your whole life producing things. And the idea of Sabbath stands against that. And this book, all right, I've just got to, maybe I'll read you a couple of quotes. The Sabbath, so, it also pushes back on this idea that the Sabbath is about accomplishing spiritual goals too. Right? Sabbath is about rest. It's about replenishing. It's about being, in our modern world, like really being extravagant with self-care. One of the things that it says is it's pushing back against spirituality. It says the Sabbath is not dedicated exclusively to spiritual goals. It is a day of the soul as well as of the body. Or here's another one. I love this. This one starts on the other page. It says, the Sabbath is not an occasion for diversion or frivolity, which is great. Like it's not just trying to change our focus and make us not think about things, but it's an opportunity to mend our tattered lives and to collect rather than dissipate time. This is brilliant. Sabbath, Abraham Joshua Heschel, should totally get that. If you're looking to get these books and you don't want to have to write them down, there's there's an Amazon link in my links in the profile. It's got all these books and even more books that I recommend. I get a lot of people asking me about the Bible, and particularly about a way to get into the academic study of the Bible. Like, how do you know what is the right way to understand a passage? How do you know the historical background and all of that? I recommend one book. It's a thicker book. It's one of these books that you can just read little by little and absorb it. But it's a book called A History of the Bible. It's by a professor, John Barton, and it doesn't just give you a history of the way the Bible was collected and that kind of stuff. It really gives you a history of thought around the Bible. It gives you an introduction to the core, like, foundational principles that you learn. Many of which I learned in grad school, right, when I was getting a divinity degree. Some of which I learned in undergrad and some religion courses. Things like the documentary hypothesis, which is that there were a handful of sources, a handful of writers or sources for the first 5 books of the Bible as it was being created. And each one has a different name for God. There's the Yahwist source, the Elohist source, the priestly source. And it's a way, one of the really important hypotheses of that informs modern scholarship in the Bible. And it gives you an introduction to that, what it is. So History of the Bible is a great book. I just saw a question, so we'll pause the books for just a minute, and I'll answer this question. Dekepo7 on TikTok asks, this has been bugging me for a while. I believe aliens exist, but did Jesus die for them too? Okay, this is a great question, and it engages a whole field of study around what is the death and resurrection of Jesus for? What does it accomplish? Now, if you listen to the more fundamentalist or evangelical people, they will tell you that there is sort of a legal transaction happening in the death and resurrection of Jesus. They would say that there are that Jesus, that all of the sins of humanity, collectively and individually, those sins had to be paid for by death, and that required a perfect sacrifice, and no human was a perfect sacrifice. So Jesus had to die to alleviate the sins. There was this legal it's called penal substitutionary atonement, that there was a penalty, that Jesus substituted himself for us, and that by Jesus doing that, he paid the price for our sins. I grew up thinking that was the only way that you could understand the death and resurrection of Jesus. Turns out there's a wide range of beliefs on the death and resurrection of Jesus, like what it means and like how it's processed. One of them says that what was happening there was Jesus was allowing himself to be a victim of a corrupt system of systemic oppression, and he was standing in solidarity with all of the people who has been victims of that before. There's a range of it. You can look all of those up. But your question about aliens interacts with that, because oftentimes when I hear people saying that, they're thinking penal substitutionary atonement. They're thinking that the death and resurrection of Jesus is only about dealing with the fall of humanity that when sin was introduced into the world in the book of Genesis. And that is one way to think about it. And some of them, as they process that, they say that they have a problem with aliens because aliens would not be victims of the fall because they were not human, whatever. But that's a very narrow view of the resurrection of Jesus. That's definitely one of the things that people can believe. People can also believe multiple things. And so if you just let yourself go of like getting into that very tightly bound narrative, you can find that aliens, that Jesus did die for aliens. And his death is the same kind of thing. So that's a good question. Thank you so much. Okay, since we've got some questions rolling in, we'll check on YouTube. We don't see any questions rolling in on YouTube yet. And let's see what we've got on Instagram. Do we have any questions there? Nope. We do have another couple of questions on TikTok. So we'll pop back over to TikTok. And Mama Mush something. You say, good morning, Mama Mushroom. That's what I thought. Mama Mushroom, what do you mean by I'm a deep skeptic? That's a really great, really great question. I get that question a lot. I'm a deep skeptic in that this is a sort of core personality trait for me. I'm skeptical about anything and everything. And because of my skepticism, I don't just straight up accept something because some random person said it, right? When I was a kid, I'm old. I grew up before the internet. And I was in a community that was very conservative. And all of the people who had like advanced theological degrees in the orbit of my life were evangelical. And so I had questions. Like I went to science class and they talked about evolution, and I've been taught about the Bible, saying that the earth was created in 7 days. So I would ask the question, I'd be like, wow, there's a contradiction here. This is weird. And at that time, they gave me the pseudoscience answer from creation scientist and offered me that answer. Now, I was a deep skeptic, and part of being a deep skeptic is wanting reputable sources, right? People that know more than you, that have those qualifications. And so when I was given that by what I assumed were reputable sources growing up, I believed in creation science. But as I got older and I met and discovered actual reputable scientific sources and theological sources, I realized that creation science is bogus. And that's because I'm a deep skeptic, right? Even though I thought I had the answer was never holding on tightly. It was always with an open hand. And when you have new data, more reliable data, you incorporate that. And sometimes that means that a belief that you have, you stop believing that way because you realize it was wrong. And that happens to me all the time. And so I am deeply skeptical about basically everything. And there are many times when I don't know if God exists, or I'm not sure what I believe. And so I live with a comfort of gray and of not fully knowing. And part of that is just believing at the core of my being that I might be wrong. I might be wrong, and really not that I might be wrong. I am wrong. I believe that I am wrong. I just don't know about what. And so what that means is that if you fully believe that you're wrong about some of the things that you believe, you just don't know what, and you're a deep skeptic, you're always questioning, you find new data, and sometimes that data says that you're wrong. And when that happens, because you're constantly on a quest for discovery, understanding, it's a lot easier to let go of of some beliefs. Thank you so much for that question, Mama Mushroom. All right, Danielle says, I struggle with the concept that God is good. It seems selfish. God seems selfish to me. How is this life and suffering worth it? I hear ya. This is something I struggle with too. The idea that God is good. I struggle with it because there are times in my life where things are really hard, where I really suffer. There are times in the lives of my friends that are really hard, where they really suffer. And how is God good in those situations? Part of this, actually, it's kind of like the movie The Matrix. I'm not sure if you ever watched the movie, but there's a point in that movie where Neo discovers, I think it's in the last of the trilogy, where the original trilogy, where Neo discovers that there were multiple attempts by the computers to create a perfect world for the humans that they were enslaving, and that they had a perfect life, but they kept rejecting it because a number of reasons, and like their brains kept rejecting it. And that, I think, is because humans have free will, and that's a core belief in Christianity, a core belief that is expressed in the Bible, throughout the Bible, a core belief actually in many, many world religions. And what that means, though, is if you have free will, if you can actually choose, that means you have to be able to choose bad. You have to be able to choose evil. And so if God is going to give us free will, that's the sort of theological, biblical doorway into this issue. If God is going to give us free will, that means we have to be able to actually choose bad, evil, whatever. And that means that we will choose that. Humanity has proven that over and over. And so the suffering in the world is not directly a result of God. It is a result of humans choosing to do evil in the world. And that's part of a way to begin processing that. And yeah, if you've got a follow-up question, just put it in there. We'll get to it. All right. Here we go. Let's see. Another question from TikTok. B. White, Morgan bought me your book. I am so glad. My book, it's called How to Not Suck as a Christian, and you can get that all over the place. What are my thoughts on modern day prophets? Well, if you're talking about modern day people who are telling the future, I would say that's different than the biblical idea of a prophet. So the role of the prophet in the Bible was not to tell the future. We get confused because my experience, the evangelical people, the fundamentalist people, particularly those who believe in something called dispensationalism, they're constantly using the term prophecy to talk about predicting the future, where in the Bible, the role of the prophet was not to predict the future. The role of the prophet was to speak on behalf of God, and generally to call the people back to faithfulness. And so they would say, punishment is coming. You need to repent. You need to get right. Otherwise, punishment is coming. Punishment is coming. A good example of this is the story of Jonah, Jonah and the whale. The story is probably not historical, but is a story about this thing in part. So Jonah is told to go to the people in Nineveh and preach that God is going to punish them. He goes and he says, God is going to punish you. God is going to punish you. And this is going to happen soon. And then the leader of Nineveh calls the whole people to repent. And then God changes God's mind and doesn't decimate them. Right? The role of the prophet wasn't to tell the future, because if that was the case, then Jonah lied. Jonah wasn't a prophet. Jonah didn't do his job because it didn't happen. Now, the role of the prophet was to call people back to faithfulness in God, generally doing this by saying, "Thus says the Lord." And so when you say modern day prophets, do I believe in modern day future tellers? I don't know. I don't have data to support that that's something that actually happens. Do I believe that there are modern day prophets in the Christian biblical sense, where there are people that are speaking on behalf of God and calling people back to faithfulness? Yes, I do believe that. Okay, let's look and see. What are your... wait. Okay. B. White, I'm not sure about what you were talking about tithing, so maybe put another question down in there. I will definitely address that. Danielle, you have a follow-up question. Why were we created at all? That's where I see God as selfish. Oh, that's great. So, Danielle, I just answered a question about her. So if you're just joining, about God being good when there's suffering in the world. And my response was to say, we have free will, and that means that we have to be able to choose bad things. So the suffering is a result of humans' choice. And I also said that I'm not really sure about all this. And so Danielle follows up with, why were we created at all? That's where you see God as selfish. Yes, and I get that, because there's a way of thinking about this, that God is very selfish, that God created us just because God wanted to play around. And if God created beings just for funsies who were going to suffer, then that's pretty cruel. But the other way of thinking about this is that God is bringing life into the universe, all kinds of life. And each kind of life has different things about it, but there is a progression of life and death, and this is sort of part of the pattern of the universe. And so God is constantly bringing life into the world, and ultimately life in multiple ways, including life in our lives, and God gives us what I would say is probably a more fulfilling life, because we get to be active agents in our life, and we have free will. But again, the consequence of free will is a suffering, because we can choose bad stuff. It's not a perfect answer. It's an answer that sometimes helps me. Sometimes I just think God is selfish. So I get that. B. White, tithing for decades and not financially blessed. Why? I struggle, but you're tithing. Oh, B. White, I get you. So this has to do with popular fundamentalist and evangelical teaching. It's commonly referred to as the prosperity gospel. And that is this idea that if you tithe, if you donate money to churches, that you will be financially blessed. that is just not in the Bible. And so that sort of preaching, the motivation to donate because you will be blessed, it's generally a predatory, in my experience, it's a predatory message. Because what it's doing is it's telling people that they need to sacrifice, they need to make donations so that they will be blessed. When that doesn't happen, it's not biblically sound. It's not sound in Christianity in any way. Also, the whole idea of tithing being 10% and being required, also not biblical, not in the Bible. If you look at the Bible and the assessment of the tithe, it was actually 22.5%. And that's because the tithe did a number of things that our taxes do. It did support the church. It did pay the priests. It did all of those things. It also dealt with the poor. It also helped with education. It also did all kinds of social services. And when the nation was a nation, right, when it was a theocracy and was ruled by the church, it was also doing the municipal functions, right? And so, so to say that the tithe, that everybody needs to give 10%, it's just completely bogus. It's why in the spiritual community that I lead, that's called Not Church, we don't do that. We don't ask people to donate. We just pay for what you get, because a lot of us have had religious trauma based on people manipulating us to give money and saying that we have to tithe, that we will, all of this stuff that you were talking about, B. White. And so instead, it's just $3 a month. Actually, if you're interested in being part of that spiritual community, it's really great, called Not Church. It's a spiritual community where we are all kinds of spiritual people, all kinds of spiritual identities, agnostic, atheist, Christian, used to be Christian, all kinds. And we're there for each other. We're exploring our spiritual beliefs, and nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you believe the wrong thing. It's $3 a month. It's pay for what you get. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, just stop paying. And if you're interested, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor, patreon.com/skepticpastor, and you can be part of it. I actually think you'll love it. I love it. It's the spiritual community I've always wanted to be part of. All right, we've been answering questions on TikTok, but we are also on YouTube and Instagram. It's our first time in Instagram. So let's see if we have any questions in the Instagram comments. Lots of really great stuff going on, but it does not look like we have we have questions in those Instagram comments, so that's fine. We'll look over at TikTok or at YouTube. Not very many questions there, so we'll go back to the questions in TikTok. All right. All right. Okay. We've got B. White's. We've got Danielle's question. Thank you, Danielle. I'm glad that helped. And then, if we agree that Jesus is not God, who should we pray to? Well, this is an interesting idea. I'm not saying Jesus is not God is generally not an Orthodox Christian view. And that's okay. You don't have to be a Christian, right? But that idea that Jesus is not God, it's a theological concept that developed really over the first 300 years of Christianity. And once it was fully established, Christians have not changed that. That's a core piece of Christian belief. But if you believe in God and you don't believe that Jesus was God, I mean, I would guess you would pray to God. I hope that helps. What are your thoughts on the idea of absolute truth? Does the idea that if enough people believe in something, then it's reality? Yeah, Andrea, I don't believe in absolute truth. I believe that all truth is relative and in the eye of the beholder. Um, there are things that are have more data to support them, but I would not claim any absolutes, right? And I think sometimes it's not just the absolutes. It's like, what are you? What's going on in in how you're approaching an idea or a question? So, for example, absolute truth-wise, gravity feels like an absolute truth. If we're dropping a ball, it always leaves our hand. It always falls to the ground. But gravity is actually not as consistent as we think. Gravity can be shifted, it can shape space and time. And when you begin to come at gravity from quantum physics, it starts getting a little weird. And so I would say, like, the idea of an absolute truth seems really problematic to me. And that's part of me being a deep skeptic, right? That is not for everyone. All right, let me give you another book recommendation. This one, it's okay. I don't like leadership books. I think that I've been forced to read many leadership books. I think the last time I counted, for staff retreats and courses, I've been made to read probably like 25 of them. I think they're all useless. Except for this one. It's called In the Name of Jesus by Henry Nouwen. And this is basically talking about leading from a place of humility, leading from a place of mysticism, and not seeking relevance, not seeking like popularity, and not even seeking leadership itself. It's a very mystical, but it's very Jesus focused. So if you like that, I think it's brilliant. It's called In the Name of Jesus by a guy named Henry Nouwen. One more book recommendations. If you'd ever like to, find these books, you can go to my profile in the link page, and I've got a link to an Amazon list that has all of these in it. And so, yeah, just check that out. This one, it's a guy named Rob Bell, who's been very influential in my life. And this is his book, Love Wins. This is the book that got him canceled by evangelicals, labeled a heretic, ultimately left his church, became a pastor, continued his role as a pastor, but in a much broader sense. This book deals primarily with hell. It looks at every passage in the Bible about hell. It looks at the concept of eternal conscious punishment in a number of ways that people think about divine punishment. And it actually offers a historical option that most people haven't thought about. And the option that he talks about that was believed for a long time by a lot of Christians in the early church was the idea that people are given the choice to follow God, follow Jesus in this life and in the next. And that choice doesn't end just because we die. It's a great book. I love this book. It was been really influential in my life. Love Wins by Rob Bell. All right, let's let me look back on these, on our questions. Okay, I'm trying to find, oh yeah, okay, so, Miko, thoughts on Deuteronomy 32, 8, 9, thoughts on this referring to the divine council. I've heard about the divine council. It is a well-known and really well-respected idea that there is in the Bible. It assumes a concept that was widely believed in that region, that there were many gods, and that there was sort of a council of gods, and that when the Jewish people, when the Torah talks about God of gods, it's actually referring to this idea of a divine council. I think it's interesting. I think it helps understand a lot of the way the Old Testament talks about God. I am not a scholar. I cannot validate that. But I know that there is pretty close to a consensus on that being the case. I hope that helps, Miko. Have you ever read the Blue Book? I have not read the Blue Book. Let's see. Can one be a skeptic and a pastor? Not trying to be sarcastic. Genuinely wondering. Ashley. Yeah, I get that question all the time. And there's two parts. So there's one part of being a skeptic and a Christian, I would say, or I would call myself a practitioner of Christianity. And that being a skeptic just means that you're looking for data, and you're constantly investigating, asking questions, having doubts, trying to find data to solve those things, and if not, leaving it open for maybe I'll figure it out someday. It also carries with it this idea that I am 100% sure I'm wrong. I just don't know what I'm wrong about. And so I'm constantly open to finding data points that that tell me I'm wrong. The more data I have to support something, the harder it is going to be for me to just decide because something new comes up that I'm wrong. But that's part of what being a skeptic is. And you find that data using the appropriate tools for any given question. So if I have a question about the age of the universe, I'm not going to use theological tools for that, right? I'm going to look at cosmologists, and I'm going to try to find a way to understand what the academic consensus is. And then I'm going to sort of get my data from that. If I'm thinking about spirituality, I am not going to use scientific tools to help me figure out if there's a God and that kind of stuff. I'm going to use the tools of religion, the tools appropriate to that field. So that's the part about being a skeptic and like a Christian. Being a skeptic and a pastor also adds to that what I understand the role of a pastor to be. And it's different. So there's a guy on here on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram named Dan McClellan. He's a biblical scholar. And, he actually tells you that his role is to increase the availability of the academic study of religion. And that is great. That is his role, to teach people exactly the sort of academic consensus. He'll do takedown videos, and he'll have somebody come up, and and then he'll tell you why they're wrong. He'll sort of dissect their argument. That is not the role of a pastor. My understanding of the role of a pastor is to help people find beliefs that help them be the best version of themselves, find beliefs that help them find a purpose greater than themselves, and find beliefs that help them connect with God or experience transcendence. And then to be there for people as they're having hard times, as they're going through things, and especially as they're trying to figure out those beliefs. And that is, in my understanding, a role of a pastor. And that does not preclude doubts or questions. It doesn't preclude you not being sure if God exists sometimes. It doesn't preclude any of that, because helping people do that, and it's helpful to them, because there's been some really great research done. Let me see if I've got the book here. Yep. Really great research done by a scholar called named Lisa Miller. She's a PhD, and it's about the awakened brain, the new science of spirituality, and our quest for an inspired life. And she talks about how people who have non-traumatic religious beliefs and practices, no matter what those are, they experience, it increases all of the markers for what we would think is a happy and healthy life, right? They're less stressed. It actually represents, there's a strong correlation between those kinds of religious beliefs and practices and the recurrence of major depressive disorder. I mean, it's just helpful. And so as a pastor, if I die and it turns out God didn't exist, but I help people find those beliefs and practices, then I've still helped the world be a better place and relieve suffering. So I hope that is helpful to you, Ashley. All right, Mahal. Did God created the earth or Lucifer, or did he create the earth and then created the angels? I don't know. There is very little in the Bible that directly talks about that. There are pieces of the Bible that people say addresses the creation of Lucifer or the devil or whatever. And the devil was an angel, and the angel fell from heaven. But those passages are actually talking about a specific historical event that had nothing to do with the devil and the modern concept of it. So I don't know. And I think that's part of, it's one of these things where you just say, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't have any data really, or reliable data. And so I'm just going to leave the question mark out there. And maybe one day I will get to a place where I have a better understanding of that. So Mahal, I hope that helps. Ashley, thank you for taking the time to answer. No problem. Andrea, how did you come about being a pastor? Did you have to go to some sort of school for it? Yeah, I did. I felt like a vocation ministry or being a pastor was what I should do with my life from a very young age. And that's a whole other story that I'll probably make a video about someday. And so I went to, in my undergrad, I got a speech writing degree and a religion minor. And I began working as with teenagers, not as an ordained clergy person. And then I decided that I really wanted to fully pursue it. And to do that in my denomination, the United Methodist Church, to do that, you have to go to seminary and get a master's degree in divinity, which is it's over 90 hours at a master's level, which most masters are about 45 hours or so. And so this really is like a double master's. It's an applied master's and a academic master's. So you have to take Greek, you have to take Hebrew, those kind of things. But you also have to take classes in like pastoral care and those kinds of things. So I did. And then there's a bunch of other vetting, psychological testing, that kind of stuff. And eventually you are ordained. Every denomination, every different stream of Christianity is different. But that's what I had to do. Thanks for asking. Okay, so there was a title of a book. I'll tell you, I've been giving book recommendations. They're all, you can go to link in my profile. There's a link to Amazon. They're all in there. But I think the most recent book I talked about was The Awakened Brain. Before that, it was a book called In the Name of Jesus. Awakened Brain is by a woman named Lisa Miller, a doctor, professor. The other one's by a theologian named Henry Nouwen. Okay, great. Let's see. If you've got questions, you can put them in the comments. Put them in the comments on YouTube or Instagram. We've got one in Instagram. Is it possible to balance faith and reason genuinely, Ponu? The more I study the Bible and other religious texts critically, the more I inch towards agnosticism. Isn't it tough to unsee what you uncover? Yes, it is very tough to unsee what you uncover. In all my videos, I say I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. Also a pastor. and I have deep questions and doubts about my faith, about God, about Christianity, the Bible, and there are times where I'm not sure if God exists, but it's not necessarily a direct correlation between that and study. Because what I would say is, you talk about the Bible. For a long time, I was told to take the Bible literally. I was told that the only way that the Bible can be true is if it's literally true, right? That's problematic because an enormous amount of the Bible is not literally true. It tells stories that didn't happen. And the Bible has changed over time as it was translated and copied. However, the Bible has inspired some of the most important movements in history, some of the most horrible ones as well. And it's a source of peace and guidance to billions of people. And so I can't discount that, right? And so understanding the Bible realistically, reading it critically, studying it and its study, how you study it, increases your understanding. And in my experience, the further you get down that path, you can really begin to see the Bible as true, not like an IKEA instruction book. So not a literalistic reading of the Bible, but the Bible being true like poetry is true, right? Like the writing of Maya Angelou is true. The words are pointing to something deeper, not just to the surface. And so I understand this trending towards agnosticism. And I would just say, take a breath. You don't have to make that decision now or ever. Keep studying. But also in your study, try to find life, because billions of people find life and help. And my experience is, once I study and I get down to the original meaning of a passage, like what the original hearers understood, it's actually something that can help me in my life. So thank you so much, Ponu, on Instagram. It's good to have you there. If you've got questions, just put them in the chat. You can put them in the chat on Instagram, on YouTube, or on TikTok. We'll get another question from TikTok. What's the difference between denominations? This is Andrea. Oh, Andri. I think it's Andri. Sorry. Andri, what's the difference between denominations? It's just like a different interpretations of the Bible. Yes and no. The Bible is part of it. Their historical, their history is part of it. So different denominations have read, so in regards to the Bible, have read the Bible in different ways and come to different conclusions about some pieces of it. And so they are separated by that. But there's also the way that they read it can be very different. So some denominations read it through the lens of the teachings of that denomination only, that the teachings have the greater authority than whatever it is that you just happen to pick up and read the Bible. So the teachings of the church have a greater authority. There's other streams that would say that actually it's personal inspiration. They would say the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that trumps everything. And that's that you read the Bible and you listen to God tell you what it means, and that's what it means. And then there's ones that say, no, you just have to study the Bible. You have to get to that original meaning. You have to use all the academic tools that you can. And then you are able to apply that to your life. Yes, that is one of them. And then the way they practice their faith is different. How they deal with sacraments and the mystical pieces of Christianity. Those are also different. So Andri, I hope that answers that question. Yeah, no problem. You don't need to apologize for being new to this world. I'm glad that you're here. Do you consider Catholics Christians? Do you think they go to heaven? Well, I don't know about heaven at all. I'm not sure exactly what heaven means, and I'm definitely sure I don't get to decide whether or not people go to heaven. But Catholicism, if you say that Catholics are not Christians, it's hard to say that anybody is a Christian. Christianity came from Catholicism. So Catholicism is what forms from the early church. And there have been many breaks, right? Many fractures in Christianity. However, Catholicism is the source for an enormous amount. And so, if being a Catholic makes you not get into heaven, I think very few people get in, if any. You were raised, Sarah, you were raised evangelical and converted to Catholicism as adults. My parents think you're going to hell. Yeah, no, that's a common belief. And I'm really sorry. I think the majority of Christianity would say they're wrong. B. White. So am I wasting my time for financial miracle to be met this week? B. White, I think, was asking about tithing earlier. I'd say if you are expecting a financial miracle based on giving to the church, you are, you're not, you're wasting your time because it's just not a theologically sound idea. I'm hoping things get better for you financially. I will hold space for that for sure. But, Bailey, what do you feel the purpose of being a Christian is? Is there a purpose? Yeah, I think so. I think that people who are Christians would say that the purpose of being a Christian is sort of twofold: to get closer and closer to God and to Jesus, and sort of a relationship, and that the point of that is that it makes you the best version of yourself. It gives you a purpose greater than yourself. Helps you experience a sense of transcendence. and yeah, I think that's the purpose. Yeah. Good question, Bailey. Andrei Lefort, or maybe it's Lefort. What are your thoughts on the new Pope? More on if you know about him or his beliefs. I don't know much about it. I know he's from America. I know that he is seen as a perfect progressive Pope. Yeah, so I hope. I don't know anything about his specific beliefs. I'm not that well versed in Catholicism and this new Pope. Yeah, well, I'll get to see how that goes. Oh, what does Danielle? What does "I'll hold space for that" mean in regard to financial question? Yeah, a holding space is a thing that people say that is. It's kind of like prayer. But I like it better than prayer because prayer, in my history, has meant saying some words and asking God to do something. Holding space is generally like prayer in that you're like holding intentions and hoping for someone to get better. And whatever sort of spirituality you practice, if you say prayers, you often say a prayer, but it's trying to to think about that, to be present with that idea and that in a way that has intention to it. And so some people will pray on it. Some people will meditate when they say that. Yeah, I hope that helps. When I first encountered that phrase, it was confusing to me too, but I've picked it up because it feels like it expresses what I want and what I do better than the word prayer. B. White, you are welcome. Have a great day. Mark, let's see, Mark, Marchie Polite? Yep. Marchie Polite, what do you mean by you're a skeptic? Does that mean you doubt God or doubt the authority of the, it looks like, Bible? Yeah, I mean, at times I doubt all of those things. But ultimately, being a skeptic means that when I have questions, I investigate them. I try to find more data and then incorporate that into my beliefs. It means that I'm 100% sure I'm wrong. I just don't know what I'm wrong about. And so I hold all my beliefs with an open hand to say, okay, I believe this. And the more data I have to support a belief, the harder it is for me to change it, of course. But I'm always open to this idea that I'm wrong. And I've changed many beliefs over the years because I have discovered places that I was wrong. And when I do that, you can let go of that. I hope that helps. I'm going to look at Instagram, see if we've got any questions there. Oh, great. We've got several. We'll go through some of these. What does my church look like? I dream of a church for people like us, but where I'm from, all churches reject this kind of thought. My church is digital. It's called Not Church. And I think you would like it. We will be doing some things in person, which is great. But it's people all over the world. Not Church is a place where it's like church. So the reason it's called Not Church is somebody says it's like church. It's all the things that they wanted, talking about religion, talking about beliefs, hearing other people's beliefs in their spiritual practices, and learning from each other and supporting each other when things get bad. We've got a channel called Holding Space where people will post and say, I'm going into the hospital. Please pray for me. All of that, but nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you've got a deck of tarot cards, right? And so it's a beautiful, accepting, learning community, and I think you'd love it. You can go to the link, my profile, and you can go to Patreon.com/skepticpastor. Patreon.com/skepticpastor. $3 a month will get you in. And we do that because we're not asking people to give us 10% of their income, right? It's pay for what you get. If it works, great. If it stops working, just stop paying. It's okay. So, that's what my church looks like. Let's see. Given theological differences, this is ABC Group Doc, amongst denomination. Given theological differences amongst denomination, which implies different truths, even among Christians, do you believe that there is a single moral code or natural theology that exists in the world? Moral code seems a little bit static, directive, like a legal code. That's problematic. I think, though, when you talk about a natural theology, yes, I would say that that it doesn't matter where you go in the world. It doesn't matter which religion you look at. Murder is always wrong. Killing, like in war, is not always wrong, but murder is always wrong. There's a number of things like that are universal just to humanity. So I would say yes and no. All right. How can we help teens get the most out of a church experience / religion without some of the negatives that can come along with it? Well, I'd say first, find a church that is not engaging in traumatic practices with teens. So not engaging in purity culture teaching where they're saying that you have to dress modestly. Women have to dress modestly because they're making men be tempted, and that they don't have control over their own body. They don't have bodily autonomy and all that kind of stuff. Look for a church that's not doing altar calls every time that they get a chance. Look for a church that has a progressive, accepting theology around LGBTQ people. I'd say look for those things first. And then the next thing is a church that's actually welcoming. And I don't mean they've got people shaking your hand at the door, but I mean church that when you go actually talks to you and you meet people. And then the other thing is make sure if your kids are involved in a church that they've got some sort of health and safety policy, abuse policy in place, that people are regularly background checked and trained. I think all of those things are a good place to start. And then I'd also say you should be involved. You should be involved in the whole thing because you'll see all of that stuff firsthand. And then if something weird happens, you can debrief with your kid. But that's a great question. Ponu, to add to Kike's question, can we attend an online service from your church or church like yours? Yes, you're kind of doing that right now because I am a digital pastor. I don't do something where there's music and a prayer and a sermon. Our church is that church called Not Church that I just talked about. We will be doing some in-person things, but that's sort of on the horizon. But yeah, Ponu Elizabeth, online community. You can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor, patreon.com/skepticpastor. Sign up there. I think it is what you're talking about. All right, we're going to look over now at TikTok. And stop by YouTube. Yep. And then go to TikTok and find some of the questions that we've got here. Okay, let's scroll down. I'm really enjoying your book. Oh, Rob, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's a book. It's a labor of love, as are almost all books. People don't get rich off of books. Funny, here's interesting. If you get a 20% royalty deal on a book, for example, you get 20% not of the cover price. You get 20% of what the distributor gives to your publisher. So oftentimes, if your distributor is Amazon, it might be 60 or 70% that they keep, and then your 40% of the book. Then if it's a $10 book, $4 of it goes back to the publisher, and you get 20% of $4. You get less than $1 per book. So you don't get rich off of books like this one. But yeah, it's a labor of love. Why do you think you're 100% wrong? Oh, I think I'm 100% wrong on some things. I just don't know what things. I'm not 100% wrong about everything. Sorry, I need to clarify that. How do you think we can evangelize the queer community better, gay and trans Christian here? Yeah. I don't like the idea of evangelism in general. And I'm not judging you for using that word. A lot of people grew up with that word, and there's not another good one available. But I think when it comes to queer people, there's a lot of trauma, and when I'm in the queer spaces that I live in, being publicly a Christian, validating their trauma, listening, but not being preachy, not trying to convert them, but just being a loving and accepting presence as someone who has a faith that they're not hiding, right? That's the thing. That's the thing that helps people recover from some of that trauma. And people will be like, oh, like I've had people say, like I just answered earlier in the chat, where's a church like yours, right? And it gives you an opportunity to invite them to an accepting and loving and affirming church. Yeah, but you can't expect that that's going to happen very often because of what the church has done to them and their friends. It's unforgivable for them, many of them. So, I'd say that. And look, we're in this together, you and I. Being part of that community is difficult sometimes when you're trying to make a positive impact on people's lives. Okay. Do you have an online sermons? Yeah, they're my TikTok videos. I also, there's a podcast that I do called Unbelief. It's 2 episodes a week. One episode is me teaching about an ancient spiritual text for like 30 or 45 minutes if you're into that kind of thing, like the Bible. I just think the most recent one that came out was, I'm talking about parables, and I did this sort of cultural background on the parable. I think it was of the, it was in parable of the mustard seed. So you can go to Unbelief. The other episodes are me interviewing people or a co-host that I have named Gabby talking about our own trauma and processing that. So that's the closest thing I've got for you. Why not too many altar calls? Oh, this is great, Mark. So altar calls are generally 2 things. My experience is that altar calls are often based on an idea of what it means to be a Christian that is not ultimately helpful, especially to teenagers, because the question was about from teenagers. This idea that everybody's going to hell by default, and if you don't say a prayer, and generally it's a 4-sentence prayer, if you don't believe that you are a horrible sinner and that you need Jesus's death to atone for that sin so that you can go to heaven, then you're not a Christian. So you've got to believe that, and you've got to ask for forgiveness, and that whole thing. That's my experience. Is most altar calls are trying to accomplish that, and generally they're done in a very manipulative way that When I talk to people who have left the church, who have been deeply traumatized by it, that was a huge source of trauma for them. And so that's why I say, let's not do that. Let's find a church that's not focusing on that specific perspective, because that's a perspective that has a tendency to be incredibly traumatizing, especially to teenagers. Okay. Were you ever part of a missionary as a kid, or did you go to camps? I've been in Young Life forever. Yes, I have been. I've got a lot of videos about that. Yeah, very much been a part of that. You always feel the only time you're actually connecting with God is in those curated moments. Okay, yeah, Andrei, I feel you. In that heightened state, there's a name for it. I can't remember the name for it. There's a heightened state, a mental state that people get in those places. You also can get those into that state at a dance club or at a concert. But getting that heightened mental state in those settings, especially Young Life, but in those settings, it's tied to God. That they're saying what you are feeling now is God, and it's problematic because when you don't feel that, then you say you are not feeling God. You're not experiencing God. Where, no. What that is this heightened mental state that is being produced as you are singing and listening and oftentimes very tired. And that heightened emotional and mental state is what that is. And can God be present in that? Yes. Can God also be present in deep study that is boring and you're reading very dry academic texts? Yes. Can God also be present in a conversation between you and your friend? Yes. And so the problem, I feel like, not just for you, but for many people, including me, right? This was a problem for me, is tying God's presence and experiencing God with that state. Euphoric is not quite it, Rob. There's like a technical term for it. I'm going to definitely do a video about that. Genesis 6:6 says that the Lord regretted, or the Lord was sorry he had made humans. Is it regret or sorry? You know, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm also not a biblical scholar. I would say you should probably try to look at what Dan McClellan says. Somebody like him, he's an actual scholar. All right, looking at comments on Instagram. Any questions we've got there? Yeah, no, I don't think so. Hey, we have been together here, some of you the whole time, some of you for just a little bit, but we've been together talking about books and all of this for about an hour and 15 minutes. And I'd like to give you another book recommendation that I get get the question, what Bible translation should you read? And the academic consensus is that the most accurate English translation on the market right now is the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. And when I say academic consensus, there is a group of academics, a membership organization called the Society for Biblical Literature. These are the Bible scholars, and these scholars have produced a text, a study Bible called the SBL Study Bible, and you can get it. It's in the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. If you like Dan McClellan, he's actually one of the scholars. He's actually one of the world's leading scholars in the Bible right now. So, yeah, that's a book recommendation. You can find the link in my profile to Amazon that's got all of these books if you want to buy them. and a bunch of other books. And I am the pastor of this community called Not Church. I'm a fully digital pastor, and yeah, it's really interesting because it's a place that is totally open and accepting of all religious traditions, of all people, anyone who wants to be involved in a religious community, even if you're an agnostic and you're just interested in religion. We've got agnostics, we've got ex-Christians, we've got Christians, we've got all kinds of different religious identities. We're all there sharing our own experiences, processing beliefs, holding space for each other, like praying for each other. There's a channel in that, it's on Discord, where people go and say, like, I'm going to the hospital. Would you please pray for me? And we're really there for each other. Like all the things that people love about religious communities, and nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you don't believe the right thing. And if somebody ever did that, I'd bounce them from the server and not feel bad about it. It's the one thing that we don't do. And if you're interested in that, I mean, I really think you'd love it. It's, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor, patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. It's $3 a month because, a lot of us have religious trauma about, around people asking for the tithe that doesn't exist in the Bible. So it's pay for what you get. If it works for you, wonderful. If it doesn't, it's okay. You just stop paying. All right. I am so thankful that you've all been here. I'm gonna answer one last question. Also, Rob said, you love Dan McClellan. You literally got all giddy when you saw the reel of both of us hanging out. That was really fun, wasn't it? Yeah. All right. Hello, this is Anna. How do you understand heaven and hell? I don't understand heaven and hell at all. I understand what a lot of people say about heaven and hell. There's just not a lot of data that is reliable. There's all of the stuff about heaven I'm a practitioner of Christianity. So in my spiritual text is the Bible. All the information about heaven is very metaphorical, right? It's not clear. There's not actual mansions in heaven. The best that you can say about heaven that seems clear is that heaven is a place where people get to experience God. How exactly you get there, what is the process, that is up for grabs and debate. Right? There are some passages about heaven that make it feel like nobody gets to go there. It's just a place where God exists, and people can visit there randomly. That's in the Old Testament because they believed everybody went to a place called Sheol, which is also why I don't really know exactly what I believe about hell, because there's not data. Like in the Old Testament, and when I say hell, I mean the popular version of hell, what people generally mean when they say the word hell. In the Old Testament, it's Sheol. It's not a place of punishment. It's where everybody goes. And in the New Testament, the things that are translated as hell are a place called Gehenna, which is a physical location on the earth, and Hades, which was actually Greek mythology. Yeah, I've actually got some videos about that if you're interested in it. But thank you so much for asking that question. And RX Self-Care, I think you'd love a book. We mentioned it earlier. It's called Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. It's all about self-care. You can get all those books at the link in my profile, as well as a place to be part of the Not Church community. Thank you all so much, and we will see you again, hopefully soon. I do these lives pretty regularly. And now on Instagram too. Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.